As part of the AshkenazFestival, the Semer Ensemble is performing this Sunday, September 4th at 7 p.m. at Harborfront Center Theatre. With us to talk about it is its artistic director, pianist, and accordionist, Alan Bern. Good morning.
Good morning, Jean.
Now, this is kind of fascinating. The Semer Ensemble is a group of world-class musicians resurrecting the long-lost recordings of Semer Records, a Jewish-German record label that was releasing music in 1933 Berlin. And Alan, what is your involvement with this? How did it begin for you?
Well, I've been playing Jewish music for over 30 years as part of the Klezmer Revival and other reasons. I've been living in Germany since 1987 in Berlin. And in 2012, the Jewish Museum of Berlin, who knew my work, contacted me and asked me to create a live program based on these recordings. The story about the recordings is really amazing. And I asked 7 musicians to join me on that project. And this year we released our CD.
Fantastic.
How did you go about finding this?
Well, the recordings were found by a record collector whose name is Rainer Lotz. And the story behind this is that there was a Jewish record label. There were actually several, but the sort of what stands in for all of them is this one called Semer. In Nazi-ruled Berlin between 1933 and 38, Jewish artists of all kinds were forbidden to perform in public for any mixed or non-Jewish audiences. And so the response on the part of the Jewish community, on the part of this label, was to say, come here to sort of the Noah's Ark. And we have hundreds of recordings made of every possible imaginable genre during that period of time, everything that a Jewish musician would have been involved in, from classical opera to cabaret to theater, Yiddish folk songs, Russian folk songs, German drinking songs, everything was recorded. The Gestapo raided the store on Kristallnacht in 38, November 9th, destroyed the entire stock and destroyed the masters. And it wasn't until just before the year 2000 that Rainer Lotz started going around the world looking for these recordings. He managed to find a copy, sometimes in pieces, of every single one of these original recordings.
Holy cow.
And they were reissued in the early 2000s in a 12 CD box set, which is still available if anybody is interested in getting it. Several $100s, but you can get it on Amazon and hear those original recordings. It's called Beyond Recall.
Wow.
Now, how have you chosen the recordings that you want to restyle, as it were?
Well, today there are a lot of fronts inside of the Jewish world in general. There's sort of the religious and then the secular, and then you would think cantorial music. What would that have to do with secular music? But the amazing thing about this recording is that all of these different genres are just side by side. Like all of the animals on Noah's Ark is really why I use that metaphor. And so for us, it was very important to have a sort of a representative example of each one of the genres. So we have something from the Russian folk song repertoire. We have something from the new Israeli repertoire. We have something from cantorial repertoire. We have something from the Yiddish theater repertoire, everything that was there.
It must have been difficult, though, to make your choices.
It was, but I'm looking forward to the future when we're going to release our second and third and fourth CDs. And so this was just the first run at it.
Right. Now, are these all, you're sticking to the original arrangements, or have you updated them, revamped them?
The original arrangements in many cases required small salon orchestras, and we didn't have those resources. So the question is more the aesthetic of the recordings. Some of of our versions try to stay very close to the original aesthetic, and some of them are quite far away. It depends a lot on the emotional intensity of the original recording. Today, in a world after Jimi Hendrix and John Coltrane and all of that, we think of popular music that can have an enormous emotional spectrum and intensity, but that's a pretty recent development. Even though in the 1920s in classical music you had with Lulu and Berg, I don't have to tell the listeners of this station, and Schoenberg and Stravinsky, extreme emotional and expressive spectrum, but that was less the case in popular music. But for us today, if a song talks about a baby who's lying in a cradle and whose mother never returns, we would like to use expressive means that are as strong as the text is. And so in certain cases like that, we made brand new arrangements.
Right. And who of your group, or are all of you involved in creating the arrangements?
Well, I lead that process, but
You're the boss.
Well, I'm the artistic director, but it's a kind of a collective led by an artistic director. The people in the ensemble are all amazing artists in their own right. And for example, if it's a vocal song, I'll ask the singer, what works best for you here? Do you have any suggestions? What things you would like to do? What you wouldn't like to do?
That
Not
makes
only
sense.
key, but also what kinds of emotional points do you want to reach here. The same thing for the instrumentals. So in this project and all of the other projects that I do, my model for this is someone like Duke Ellington or Charles Mingus, who really tried to draw with the resources of the remarkable artists that they worked with, rather than imposing a written score on them.
Right. I'm curious, what drew you to Berlin in the first place?
Well, my parents come from an Eastern European Jewish background. I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, home of Indiana University. I was surrounded by German and Hungarian and Austrian accents by the professors there, and grew up really with an ideal of culture that was a lot like what one would have gotten in pre-war Germany. And a little bit later in my life, when I learned about the Holocaust, of course, the contrast between these two different kinds of German backgrounds and where was my position in all of that was very, very striking. And that's the kind of conflict that can either tear you apart, or if you're an artist, it can motivate you. And at a certain point, I decided I'm going to go to Berlin. I'm going to learn German. I'm going to see what echoes are still there, and I'm going to plunge into that.
Good for you. And how many pieces, how many numbers are on your new recording?
I think that there are 13 pieces on there.
And we're going to play one of them. And tell us about that.
This is a tune that was recorded by a wonderful artist named Pinkus Lavender. And here it's being sung by a Grammy Award winner, lead singer of the Klezmatics, Lawrence Klamberg, whom I'm very proud to have in our project. And it's called Ich tanz und mein Herz weint, and which means I'm dancing, but inside while I'm dancing, my heart is crying because the woman in my arms doesn't love me anymore.
Oh, we can all relate.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Thank you, Gene.
And have
it
a
was a
wonderful
pleasure
evening.
to be here, and I hope that audiences will come to this remarkable show.
Oh, I'm sure.
Thank you.
We've been talking with artistic director Alan Bern about the Berlin-based Semer Ensemble. They're performing this Sunday, September 4th at 7 p.m. at the Harborfront Center Theater. For more information, go to ashkenaz.ca. And here is the piece.